This is The Healthy Healer, where true voice is your medicine. This is where we help doctors and other healers navigate through the challenging times by learning from the best minds in the healing industry. Laugh, cry, and be surprised. It's entertainment, education, and inspiration so you can continue to be the unique and amazing healer you were destined to be. Welcome to humanity. Welcome to The Healthy Healer with Dr. Fred.
Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Fred, and welcome to another edition of The Healthy Healer, where we interview people who became healthy first and then became healers. Usually on their way through, they thought they were healers of some sort, and then life hit them upside the head. They got a little taste of that, and it compelled them, or maybe amplified for them, the healing skills. As I read our guest's bio and have explored a little bit about what she represents, she meets this criteria quite well. Quincy Whorf is our guest tonight. Quincy lives down in Newport Beach, California, and is a dedicated clarity coach. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. She's also a recovery coach and is a consultant at the Quincy Whorf Consulting Company, where, of course, she is the owner and key facilitator at that facility. Quincy's passion for helping others stemmed from her own personal experience with addiction, and her understanding and empathy has grown over several decades. So who she finds herself now is a dedicated and completely committed coach to providing comprehensive support to her clients and making a real difference with the people who know her in her network's circle of friends, colleagues, and associates. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Quincy Whorf. Quincy, thanks for being on The Healthy Healer this evening. It's great to have you as a guest.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fred. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it really is an honor. I love interviewing people who are making a big difference and who have done it for some time and been through life a little bit, learned about the dips and turns that life has to offer, and are still standing tall in making a difference and a contribution to the world for who you are, for who they are. But before we get started, I'd like to help our listeners learn a little bit about you. And I asked my 9-letter question to get that done. And here's the question. It's a powerful question that can be actually encapsulated in 9 letters, which is, Quincy Whorf, who are you?
Who am I? I am a woman who grew up in Los Angeles, California. There's not a lot of us left, so those of us that are natives are few and far between. But I grew up in Los Angeles. My father worked in the music business, and he designed album covers back in the day when album covers were actually still a thing. and so we had a really interesting life. My grandfather was an actor. I grew up in the entertainment industry, and which was fun, and we had a lot of great friends, and there was a lot of creativity going on. But my father was also an alcoholic, and his alcoholism changed the trajectory of not only his life, but all of our lives. And it's funny, you said something about being a healer or thinking that we were a healer. I never thought I was a healer as a kid or as a young person. I always thought I was a perpetual victim. Like, I seemed to find trouble. I seemed to find every possible trauma that could beset me. And it wasn't until years later that I realized there must be a reason that all of these things have happened in my life. And if the only reason these things have happened is for me to help other people heal from them as well, then it must be reason enough. And so I've gone about my journey really doing just that. Whatever comes down my way is something that I will be able to use and benefit from later, and somebody else will be able to benefit from, hopefully, as well. And so I've changed the way I look at trauma. I've changed the way I look at emotional pain. I've changed the way I look at a lot of things as a result of just starting with that very basic belief of, if the only reason I'm here doing this is to help somebody else, then that has to be enough.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I really get it. And I'm wondering, your bio openly suggests that you've had your own battles with your own addiction. Is that right?
Yes, I sure did. I sure did. Yeah, when you grow up in an alcoholic home, it's really easy to get alcohol because everybody's drunk and nobody's really paying attention. And my dad and I had a very special relationship. He was the love of my life. And so he wasn't opposed to me drinking every once in a while with him. And that the magic of alcohol for me was that it changed everything. It changed how I felt, it changed what I felt, it changed me from feeling at all, from caring about anything at all. And it became the magic serum that made me a better person, so I thought. And eventually became my solution to everything. And I didn't have a choice about how it affected my life. And I was the kind of kid that if a little bit's good, then a whole lot more is better.
Yeah.
And that was always, one was never enough, and 1,000 was never enough either. And I would drink until my body said you're done. And a lot of things happen to kids do that. A lot of things happen to me. I put myself into some pretty bad situations, woke up in strange places, not knowing how I got there, was sexually assaulted many times, but always felt like I deserved it, never really thought of it as a sexual assault, only to find out years later that it affected me on a level that I had no idea about. And it wasn't until I got sober when I was 18 years old, because I couldn't stay drunk enough to be frozen forever, and I couldn't live sober. I didn't know how to do the two, and it finally got to a point where I couldn't pay the prices anymore that drugs and alcohol was making me pay. And my life changed again and went in a different direction.
And how old were you when you got sober then?
I was 18 when I got sober, and I probably got drunk the first time to get drunk around 12, 13, something like that.
So
probably
6 good years of really good life.
Yeah, 6 good years. So.
Yeah, so 18 years old is pretty young in the greater scheme of things, of finding your way to sobriety and finding your way to program, if you will, or finding your way to recovery. I recognize some things in your words and your word choices that are similar to what I've heard behind those doors. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit about how sobriety altered you and then left you feeling like maybe you were here to help others. Was it about being a sponsor? Was there something to that? Or was there something about being of service inside of recovery? Where do you get the impetus that if you're going to go through all this pain, that you might be here to really help somebody on the next rung of the ladder?
It was interesting because when I got sober, I really believed that drugs and alcohol was the problem. Right? Like most people do. We think, okay, drugs and alcohol is the problem. So if I get rid of drugs and alcohol, then the problem will go away. The problem is that the problem didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. And my choices that I made as a result of how I felt, how toxically insecure I was, how riddled with shame I was, how disconnected from myself, from humans, from anything bigger than me I was, that continued. Because I kept looking for solutions in other things, not necessarily in a conflict resolution system, but in other people, in other shopping or eating or inappropriate situations, right? That always ended up taking me down a road that created more drama and trauma in my life. And it wasn't literally until I was like, I don't know, I think I was 5 or 6 years sober when another major trauma had happened, and I was like, this has to be happening for a reason. There must be a reason that this is happening, because I didn't grow up in a family where religion or a higher power was anything that anybody ever talked about. Like my dad, I asked him when I was 5 who God was. He said he was. Like that was the end of my religious upbringing. But so I didn't have any kind of understanding of a spirituality life or a spiritual life in any way. But I knew from being around people who were experiencing spiritual things that there was something bigger going on. And so I was to investigate that. And one of the things that I loved was I felt very comfortable believing in the idea that nothing happens in this world by mistake. And that was the beginning of a spiritual experience for me. And I still believe that on some level today. Like everything is happening for me. I get to choose if I want to see that it's happening for me or against me. But back in the day, it was always happening against me. And so I had a lot of healing to do. And it wasn't until I got, I don't know, 13 years sober, I think, where I finally hit another wall in sobriety and took a different channel and actually got somebody in my life who was willing to tell me the truth, regardless of how it's going to make me feel. And it changed the trajectory of my life. And then I was able to do the same for others. So that was where it began.
Okay, can you share with us what the truth was that you learned at that point?
The truth was that I was the problem. that was really, that was as simple as it got, that I was the problem, that I'm trying to get people, places, and things to change so that I didn't have to. And I was a master at being right about how wrong you were, so I didn't have to be different. All I had to do was get rid of you. And I got rid of tons of people, and I got rid of tons of situations, and I stopped going to clubs or places on the west side and started only going in the valley. And then I stopped going outside of the valley and went to another side of the valley. I just kept moving my locations and moving the people, but the problems kept following me. It wasn't until I was, 13 years sober that I really realized that I was the problem. It was decisions I was making, and it was the way that I was seeing things through my eyes in the world that caused all of my problems. And if I could change the way I saw things, then I could change the way that I related to things. And that was a painful process, but an amazing process too,
Yeah, transformational and super cleansing and reconstruction and a whole bunch of recontextualization and a whole redefinition of what it means to be alive is what it sounds like.
100%. Like everything I believed was coming from a child's point of view, really. Like it was super immature thinking and childlike thinking that I don't realize is childlike thinking until we get on the other side of it. And then we go, oh wait, that's how little kids think. And if I could change those things, then all of a sudden I could have a new experience, but not always easy.
Yeah, and so was that approximately the point where you decided to step into being what you're now calling a clarity coach, a recovery coach, or had that preceded it to some degree?
That my coaching thing, like I've been coaching people for the last 23 years, so it's been something that I've always loved doing. I never thought of it as like a full-time thing. Like it was something I always did on the side because I loved helping people. Every time I would help somebody, I would learn something new about myself, which was an amazing experience, sometimes a painful one as well. But I loved watching the lights come on for other people. I loved watching people get a level of freedom in their soul that they had never gotten before. And when COVID happened, what I did for a living prior to that was I was in the events business, and COVID shut down the events business. So I started doing coaching full time, and it just took off as things did. And it's been a pretty amazing experience to do this on a full-time level and make this my sole vocation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I noticed that in your bio, you talked a little bit about being, let's see where I can find this real quick. You talked this about working with young people primarily, yes?
I do a bunch of different things, but one of my, I guess, my passion projects is speaking to kids at high schools about addiction, about the problems that happen with kids, what the choices that we make, thinking that it's not a big deal when it's actually going to be life altering. And how I wish there were things I knew or people that I could talk to when I was a kid about stuff that was going on with me that I never had the opportunity for. And I love working with teenagers. I think that they're interesting people. And I think that if we catch them at the right time, in the right moment, and give them a voice and give them a platform to be heard, they want to be heard. I really believe that they want to be heard. And I want to provide that for them. I do. I provide that for them.
And how do you get your referrals? Is it mostly for teenagers? Is it mostly from their parents, their moms, or is it from the schools, or is it from the legal system?
I go and I speak in schools, and I have a weekly meeting that I give to them for free where they join on, and I interview somebody that I know that also had a lot of problems as a teenager and can talk about what they learned. And they can ask questions anonymously. They can participate anonymously. I think one of the things with kids that's so important is giving them the freedom to be whatever they need to be without having to worry that people are judging them because they know who they are. And so I give them an opportunity to participate without revealing who they are so that they can get the questions answered that they want. And so it usually comes from speaking in schools, or sometimes it's a parent that'll say, please work with my kid. They're not talking to me anymore, or whatever. So sometimes it's other kids. It just depends. I work with a lot of parents too. It's helping parents see their kids in a different way. Being that kid that was such a merit in school, I understand these kids. I understand how they feel. I was that kid forever. And it was terrifying. And I didn't know how to talk to my parents then either. They were busy doing other stuff. And it was a different time. I just want people to, if people want to ask questions, somebody should be there to answer them. Not that I have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm at least willing to have a conversation with anybody.
Mhm. Now, it wasn't always that way. I see this again in what you sent us. The idea was that initially you had 20 years experience in a different field, in a peripheral field, in meeting and conference and event planning, and even as C-level executive assistant. Was that what was going on? That was going on as of 18 years old, or did you get a degree that headed you in that direction, or college, or how did that happen in your life, and how did that morph into becoming a coach?
It was interesting. Because my dad was in the music industry, I actually did everything I could not to work in the music industry, but I ended up there anyway. And I worked for a concert promoter for 20 years or whatever it was. And then I ended up being on the road with bands, and I ended up being on the road with people who also needed help. So no matter where I've gone, like, I mean, my whole life, people have always come to me for answers, or have always come to talk to me about stuff, or to tell me stuff, or whatever it is. So no matter what job I've been in, that has always just been a part of my life. And it wasn't until I did all that and I did school, and I went to school, I got a college degree, I did all of that stuff. But being an event planner, there was something about that I fell into, and it was just my life for a long time. And then I just fell into this as a result of always having done it. It just became full time. So it's being a coach is, I'm a big believer that if I coach people, that I should be coached by somebody. And I've had multiple coaches in my life that have taught me so much about myself. Because if I'm not learning about me, then I don't have a lot to pass on. But I'm always willing to learn about me. It's not always comfortable by any stretch, but I'm always willing to learn because I always want to have something to pass on to somebody else. And my experience is what has made me so effective, and my willingness to do the work on myself. Like there's a lot of people who work in this field or work as therapists who have never done the work on themselves, because I've had some of those therapists, and they weren't harmful, but they couldn't help me on levels that people who have actually done this kind of work and done the healing and done the stuff to find out who they are, what they really need to change. Those people find each other, and I've found a bunch of really great people. So I've been lucky.
Yes, it's wonderful. And what is your take at this point? Are you able, when someone asks you, can I be at parties where there's drinking, or can I hang around other people who are smoking weed or using other drugs? Can I be friends with those people? Is that something that is dangerous to actually get involved with other people who are drinking, or to be in the presence of other people who are ingesting mind-altering substances of any sort?
Yeah, it's dangerous in the sense of, one of the biggest things about being an addict or an alcoholic is that we have a brain that tells us we don't have anything wrong with us. And so that this time will be different. And that was always my problem. I've had a problem dating, like, oh, this time I'll be different with this person, when it's the same thing over and over again, because I didn't change any of my behaviors or my ideas about it. And so there were plenty of times in my early sobriety that I hung out with people that were smoking pot or were doing cocaine or drinking a lot, that I never felt like I fit there, but I didn't want to not be there out of fear of missing something. And I put myself in pretty dangerous predicaments as a result of that. And it's hard sometimes to let go of the idea of that life. And it wasn't until I walked away from people that were like that that my life got a little bit better. Because that tempting fate is dangerous for people like me. Being somebody who could get addicted to light bulbs if they give me enough pleasure, I have to be careful about where I go and what I do, and not for any other reason than I want to live life. I don't want to live feeling like I'm not having a full life, and being around those situations makes me feel like I'm not living a full life, when the truth is my life is very full.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic, beautiful. Yeah. So, what are some of the risk factors that you think people, maybe teenagers who might be listening or parents of teenagers, what should the parents of teenagers be looking for or making sure that they're directing their children away from so that they, if there is such thing, is there a way to prevent, to preempt the addiction, to actually step in front of it so that it doesn't look so attractive to our teenage colleagues down
One of the things that I tell kids all the time is that there's three real reasons that kids pick up drugs and alcohol, or they try it. Number one is curiosity, right? They just want to know what it's going to make them feel like. Number two is peer pressure, and number three is to change how they feel. And sometimes it's all at once. And so it's not abnormal for kids to want to try that kind of stuff, but it is a conversation that all parents need to have with their kids about what the risk factors are and what the choices are. I've had to have with my kids as well. And it's a conversation we've always had. It's a conversation we've had since they were very little, just because always been a part of my life. And like I have a kid right now my son, who is the apple of my eye. He's my second child, but he is what's the word? Experimenting with smoking pot, and we have rules around it. And he said to him, as long as you're not lying to me about what's going on, I don't condone what you're doing, but you need to know that I'm a safe place for you to talk about it. And we talk about it. And then every once in a while he starts lying again. And it's when I know he's probably smoking more than he shouldn't be. And then he gets in trouble. Then there are consequences for that. And like, he's not allowed to drive stoned, but he did one time, and I caught him driving, and now he doesn't have a car. Those are the things that happen. And it's not fun to watch, but at the same time, I know I have to watch my kid go down the road that he has to go down. I hope it's not a long road. I hope it's not a road that was similar to mine, but I also know that I can't stop it from happening. Like, I have a friend who gets mad at me because I don't scream and yell at my kid, and I don't lock him in his room, and I don't do all the things. And I said, that was done to me when I was a kid, and it made things worse. It made me want to do worse things. And I'm not saying that happens for everybody, but I'm not going to do what I know didn't work for me. But it's hard. It's hard as a parent to watch your kid struggle. And we talk about what's going on with him and what he's nervous about. If he's a senior in high school, he's worried about what his life's going to look like after high school. He doesn't know what he wants to do or where he wants to go. And so his anxiety levels are through the roof right now. And on some level, he acknowledges that, but he doesn't want to deal with it. And that's a lot of the time what happens with kids, that stuff comes up, anxiety comes up that they don't know how to deal with. And they don't know how to talk about either. And we made anxiety sound like it's a bad thing. Anxiety. How we deal with anxiety is not always the greatest thing. But just being able to talk about your anxiety changes everything. And a lot of parents don't want to hear what's going on with their kids. They don't want to hear their anxiety. They can't deal with it, or they cause it. That's even worse.
So excellent. So tell me a little bit about what is a clarity coach and how do you step into that role? What is that? What is your intention as to bring clarity? But if you can expand on that a little bit, what is a clarity coach?
What I basically do is I help people reframe trauma. A lot of the times clients will come to me and they won't understand why their marriage is falling apart, or they won't understand why they can't get married, or they won't understand why they're losing jobs, or they're doing a job that they can't stand. And a lot of the times, if we untangle some of the trauma that happened to them as a kid or in their lifetime, you can see where they started making decisions based on that trauma, based on the fears that came out of that trauma. And learning how to look at those things in a different way, all of a sudden can change the trajectory of your life in a new way. I'm trying to think of a case, but like, I had somebody who came to me recently, and we were talking about them being molested as a kid. And then later down the line, they felt about a tremendous amount of shame about how they behaved sexually with people in their early teens and early 20s. And when we talked about the whole thing together, I was able to take her back to the molestation piece and say, look, you were groomed a certain way by this person. So that behavior that you're so ashamed of, that was taught to you through that first situation. And I said, you didn't really come up with that on your own. That was taught to you from the very beginning. And I said, so if it's taught to you, it means it can be untaught. And I said, but also it means that you're not a bad person for behaving the way that you did. You were taught to be that way. And all of a sudden it changed the way this and lived her whole life. All of a sudden it was like, oh my God, I never thought of things in that way. We make decisions about stuff that happens to us that aren't necessarily true. And untangling those decisions, untying those binds is part of what I test with people, which is how can I help you see this differently? Let's look at this in a totally different way. What if it means this? What if it means something completely different than what you think it means? What would your life look like then? Because a lot of people hold on to their trauma as like a badge that I have to stand behind. This is who I am. It's no, your trauma isn't who you are. It's a path that you go down, but you get to decide what you do with that path.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just like to help people see those kinds of things in a totally different way. So I give them clarity on what those things could mean differently than what they think it means.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Very great. Okay. And if people want to work with you or learn a little bit more about you, where would they look to find you? And what kind of things would they be looking for in order to work or learn from you?
I have a website. My website is QuincyWhorf.com. And I'm sure that'll be in the show notes when you post this. But I'm also on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all over the place. I post videos all the time about things I think of or ideas that I think of so people can see what my thinking style is like. But I do all the different kinds of things. I do one-on-one coaching. I do couples coaching. I do small group coaching. I do all kinds of different workshops every once in a while. So there's some way to work with me in different ways. And it just depends on what you want to deal with. Like, in my mind, everything is connected. Like people always say, oh, what do you deal with? I deal with everything. You know what I mean? Let's just put all your stuff on it. Let's empty your purse and let's see what's going on, you know, and let's straighten things out. And that's just, if people are a puzzle, and I like to rearrange the puzzle. So
fantastic. You're great. You're great at what you do, and it's really inspirational to speak with you. Thanks for doing exactly that. Thanks for reaching down low into the younger age group as well. That's my favorite group as well, and that's how I got started. And for doing the work on clarity and doing the work on addiction and recovery, and to do that from an experience space, from an authentic experience space of having gone through what you've gone through in your life. With your family and with your amazing upbringing that led you to actually do the things that you didn't learn either, as it turns. You didn't,
as it turns out,
make it up.
No, not an original idea.
Not an original idea at all. So thanks for being here. It's been a pleasure. And if you had one last thing you wanted to say to our listeners, maybe a gem or a nugget, what might that be, Quincy?
My thing to people right now is invest in yourself. People are so afraid to invest in themselves. They'll invest in everything else, right? They'll avoid dealing with themselves on almost any level. If you really want your life to change, then be willing to invest in yourself and be willing to see the stuff that you don't want to see so that you can get past it. You're not bound to be who you are in this moment. You who you want to be. And all of us are meant to be great things in this life. I really believe that. And the only person getting away with that is me. So get out of your own way, literally.
Yeah, invest in yourself and get out of your own way. I love it.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Quincy. It's really been great to have you. I've really appreciated this conversation. You're really a superstar, and it's fabulous to have you on the show as a healthy healer. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dr. Fred. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And we'll catch you on the flip side. Bye.